What if the recession is not coming? What if it is already here? Not on Wall Street. Not in a government report. Not in a press conference. In your kitchen, in your wallet. In the quiet math of your monthly budget that stopped adding up sometime in the last 6 months. Here is what happened this week. Goldman Sachs, the most closely watched research desk on Wall Street, raised its recession probability to 25%, up 5 percentage points in a single week. For context, in a healthy economy that number sits around 15%. Goldman is now at 25% and rising, and that number was published before the full impact of rising oil prices and the Strait of Hormuz situation has worked its way through the economy. Moody's analytics puts the number even higher. 42% chance of recession within 12 months. Their chief economist, one of the most respected voices in American finance, said publicly this week, "We will most likely get through 2026 without a downturn. But nothing else can go wrong. Like, nothing. Nothing else can go wrong." That is the most alarming thing a senior economist can say while trying to sound reassuring. And here is the part that matters most for ordinary Americans. Deloitte's Consumer Products Division has stated something that every middle-class household already knows from lived experience, but that nobody in official Washington is willing to say directly. The bottom half of the economy is already in recession. Already, not heading toward recession. Not at risk of recession, already there. The question is no longer whether a recession is possible. The question is whether the half of America that is already living through one is about to be joined by everyone else. Let me show you the 5 signs, not from a textbook. From this week's actual data, sign 1, the jobs market is broken. The United States lost 92,000 jobs in February 2026. Economists had forecast a gain of 59,000. That is a miss of 151,000 jobs in a single month. Goldman Sachs economist David Mericle stated that the bank's estimate of underlying job creation now sits barely above zero, trailing even the 70,000 jobs per month needed just to keep up with population growth. We are not creating enough jobs to absorb the people entering the workforce. That is not a slowdown. That is a jobs recession. Sign 2. Housing is already in recession. America's Credit Unions Chief Economist stated this week, in plain language that rarely comes from institutional economists, that the housing sector has already entered its own recession. Home sales are down 20% since before the period of disruption in 2020. Existing home sales fell 8.4% in the most recent report, the steepest single drop in nearly 4 years. Mortgage rates remain above 6%. Construction is declining. If you are waiting to buy a home, you are waiting in a market that economists are already calling a recession. Sign 3. Small businesses are losing confidence. Federal Reserve data released this week shows that small businesses, the businesses that employ nearly half of all private sector American workers, are broadly pessimistic about 2026. The Small Business Credit Survey found that the share of small businesses expecting revenue growth dropped to its lowest level since 2020. Expectations for employment growth fell to multi-year lows. Small businesses do not cut staff quietly. When they lose confidence, layoffs follow. And those layoffs come for the people who can least afford them. Sign 4. Inflation is coming back. Goldman Sachs raised its headline inflation forecast by 0.8 percentage points this week, projecting that inflation could hit a spring peak near 4.5% if the Strait of Hormuz situation remains unresolved for even 1 month. That is not the inflation cooling down that you were promised. That is inflation reaccelerating. At the exact same time as jobs growth is collapsing and consumer confidence is falling. That combination, rising prices alongside economic weakness, has a name. Economists call it stagflation. The last time America experienced true stagflation was the 1970s. It took nearly a decade to escape. Sign 5. Consumers are running out of road. Consumer spending is approximately 70% of the entire US economy. When consumers stop spending, the economy contracts. Right now, retail sales fell 0.2% in January, flat in December, and here is the detail that explains everything. The wealthiest 10% of American consumers now generate nearly half of all consumer spending in the United States. Half. That means the health of the American economy depends almost entirely on whether wealthy people keep buying things. The bottom 90%, the people watching this video, are already pulling back, already choosing less, already saying no, already doing the math and coming up short. The Conference Board's leading economic index, which has predicted every American recession since the 1960s, declined for the 5th consecutive month in December. 5 consecutive months of decline. I want to be honest with you right now. Nobody, not Goldman Sachs, not Moody's, not Morgan Stanley, is certain a recession is coming. Goldman's base case is still continued growth. Their 25% recession probability still means their base case is no recession. Moody's 42% still means their base case is survival. But here is what every single one of those analysts agrees on, regardless of which number they use. The margin for error is gone. Quote, directly from Moody's chief economist this week, nothing else can go wrong. That is not confidence, that is a warning dressed up as optimism. So what does a real person do when the margin for error disappears? First, understand what stagflation means for you. If Goldman's forecast is correct, inflation peaks near 4.5% this spring while the job market stays weak. The Federal Reserve cannot easily fix this. Rate cuts would stimulate the economy but worsen inflation. Rate hikes would reduce inflation but worsen the job market. The Fed is stuck. Which means you cannot rely on policy to rescue your household finances in the next 6 to 12 months. You are on your own. Second, protect your job before you need to. Small business confidence is collapsing. Hiring across all sectors has essentially stalled. If your industry is sensitive to consumer spending, retail, hospitality, non-essential services, now is the time to quietly build options. Update your resume, strengthen professional relationships, build a financial buffer that buys you time if your income becomes unstable. Not because you will definitely lose your job, because the cost of being unprepared is catastrophically higher than the cost of being prepared and not needing it. Third, reduce variable rate exposure. Credit card debt at 22% interest is dangerous in a stable economy. In a stagflationary environment, it is a trap that can close very quickly. If you are carrying significant credit card balances, this is the moment to attack that debt with everything available to you. Even small reductions in high-interest debt provide more financial security than almost any other action you can take right now. Fourth, watch the next 90 days very carefully. 3 things will determine whether Goldman's base case or worst case plays out. The Federal Reserve's decision in the coming weeks, whether rate cuts are coming or being delayed. The situation at the Strait of Hormuz, if shipping resumes, energy prices fall, and inflationary pressure eases. And the labor market report for March, which will tell us whether February's collapse in job creation was temporary or the beginning of a trend. These 3 signals, watch them, because right now, America's economy sits at a fork in the road. One path leads back towards stability. The other path leads to something that the bottom half of this country is already living through, and that the top half has been insulated from. Until now, real cost America. We are here every time the numbers change. And right now, the numbers are changing fast. Subscribe. Because the next 90 days may be the most financially consequential period for ordinary Americans in over a decade.